Cap Times Idea Fest 2020 is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, the Burrish Group at UBS, a financial services firm with global access and a local focus to pursue what matters most for its clients. Major sponsors are HealthX Ventures, backing entrepreneurs who are creating value with digital health solutions. Exact Sciences, pursuing earlier detections and life-changing answers in the fight against cancer. Quartz, health plans built with you in mind. And Madison Gas and Electric, your community energy company whose goal is net zero carbon electricity by 2050. Co-sponsors are Epic Systems and the Godfrey Kahn Law Firm. Other sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Home Savings Bank, Unity Point Health Meritor, Cargo Coffee, and the Forward Theater Company. Media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal and Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Please consider becoming a Cap Times member. Learn more at membership.captimes.com.
Hello, I'm Paul Fanland, editor and publisher of the Capital Times, and I'd like to welcome you to Cap Times Idea Fest and this very special session featuring Bob Woodward interviewed by his longtime friend and colleague, David Maraniss. This is our 4th annual event, but the first we are presenting virtually. Our theme this year is 2020 Changes Everything. Given the local and regional impact of COVID-19, the resulting economic damage, and the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a lot to talk about. We think this year's lineup is our best yet. We believe Idea Fest has grown into a signature event on the Madison calendar. It is also an important showcase for the Capital Times, our locally owned and century-old journalism brand. If you're not already, we hope you'll consider becoming a Cap Times member. As a member, you'll have access to special Idea Fest programs plus benefits throughout the year. You'll also be supporting an independent and trustworthy local media source at a time when that has never been more important. Learn more at membership.captimes.com. I'd like to thank the Burrish Group at UBS, which is the presenting sponsor of Idea Fest and has been with us since the start. Andy Burrish and Jason Moss have built their asset management firm's stellar reputation by effectively investing for Madisonians, but also for investing in Madison. Their generous support of Idea Fest is but one example of their community commitment. The Burrish Group is the session sponsor of this visit with Bob Woodward. Again, thank you and welcome.
Hello, Wisconsin and Cap Times Idea Fest viewers everywhere. This is a very special occasion for me. I've known Bob Woodward for 41 years, and this is the first time I've interviewed him in public at all. One part of it could not be easier. I really don't even have to introduce him because you all know him for what he's done over the last half century. He reports on people in power, especially presidents, and writes about them for the Washington Post and in groundbreaking books. His latest book, Rage, rips away the curtain of today's chaotic White House and takes us deep into the troubling mind of Donald Trump. Bob and I have had countless conversations over the decades that have been marked by two things above all else. The first is that we both honor a search for the truth and the very hard work it takes to get there. Bob has taught me more than anyone I know about the need to go back and back and back once more in pursuit of what really happened. Other people pontificate and postulate. Bob does the hard work of extracting information, secrets, documents, piece by piece, that become invaluable to the public welfare. The second thing about our conversations is that we push each other and sometimes disagree. Not on the facts, but on the meaning of those facts, their context. I think that's what true friends do in our profession. And I always learn from talking with Bob. Also, Bob's another Midwesterner, born in Wheaton. So first of all, Bob, welcome, and thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.
One thing about the Trump era is that there's always something new, another trapdoor that opens, something shocking and surprising. The latest being the president himself getting COVID-19. In your conversations with him and the people around him, what did you learn that can help explain his actions that he's had since getting it? first hiding it from the public and his staff, having doctors be less than transparent and saying what they did, and then diminishing its dangers. Yesterday, he said, you catch it and you get better. How do you explain that?
Yeah, and yesterday he said getting the virus for him was a blessing from God.
Yes.
And he had said earlier in the week, went so far as to say, don't be obsessed by this, don't let it get you down. All of this idea of, well, we can just move on. And I think the core part of him, it goes back to he doesn't understand the job of being president and the responsibilities that when the first interview I did with him for this book was December 5th, 2019, last year, so 10 months ago. And went into the Oval Office, took my little Olympus tape recorder out, plunked it down on the Resolute desk and said, this is all going to be on the record. It's going to be for a book to come out in September or October. And one of the things in that first interview, I asked, what do you think the job of the president is? And he said, oh, the job of the president is to protect the people. Actually, the conduct of President Trump has been always to protect himself and work in that narrow world of what is his interest. And it is a tragedy that the basic he does not understand. And so we now see, you don't have to go far back during the debate with Biden. He literally said he's not going to guarantee a peaceful transfer of power if he loses, I guess, and just said it categorically. Now, the basic responsibility of the president is to ensure the continuation of the democratic process. David, I mean, you know this, so can you think of anything more central to the Constitution and the idea of us having one person who's vested with all these executive powers?
Well, since George Washington, when he decided he wasn't going to be king, of course, that's at the center of it all. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And Trump's failure to understand, his failure to get beyond this idea of himself. We all are prisoners of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we need to learn from childhood on is to figure out how others feel, how they're reacting, what they want to do. And this basic part of human relations is missing from Donald Trump.
I'm glad you mentioned that first interview. We're going to talk about that in detail later in the interview because I focused on that chapter in the book, chapter 26, I think. But just getting to going back to your book, your first book, Fear, when you were talking about that after it came out, you said, I just hope to God we don't have a crisis. Yeah. And so I could see that as you started to approach Trump for all of these interviews, that was one of the things you were getting at. Did he understand the consequences of that job? Do you think he ever realized that the pandemic was the greatest test of his leadership?
I talked to him about this. I kept saying, this is, you have it. You have to guide and define the national interest in this pandemic. And he just never would get it, for instance. And this rests on examples to a certain extent. He kept talking about Boeing. Oh, Boeing is in trouble. They have the MAX plane, which has not worked. They have this problem. Can you believe what happened to Boeing? And I said, no, wait a minute. This isn't about Boeing. This is about you leading the country. And I literally said to him at one point, your problem with the virus, which is a pandemic which is just decimating this country, is 10,000 times the problem that Boeing had. And he was just like, oh, well, but look at Boeing and what's happened to them. And I think there is, you almost have to, I'm going to go a little further with you, David, because you and I, that you need a basic test before you become president, that you almost have to take a test about the Constitution, about the obligation, and let's go to the heart of it. The president has a moral obligation to the people in the country, not just a political one, not just a practical one, not just to take care of people, but he has a moral obligation, and he has no concept of that. Secretary of Defense Mattis, I quote in the book, saying he has no moral compass, and Trump has no moral compass, unfortunately, and it's all about him. And so the idea, historians are going to be writing about this for years, that how did he get elected? What happened in 2016 that he was elected? And I've talked to him extensively about that, because I think there was a situation in the country that the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, both failed to understand what was going on. I would say in our business, David, the media, we didn't understand what was going on, how alienated so many people felt, how many people were looking for somebody who was a disruptor. They love the idea that he has no decorum at all. He will say anything and do anything, and there are millions of people in the country just cheering that on. Oh, yes, that's right. Stick it to the elite, stick it to the establishment. And he saw that the old order, now intellectually, I don't think so. Intuitively, yes. He saw the old order was dying, going away. And he captured that. And I talked to him, he captured history's clock, and he did. And anyway, I agree with all on. And,
I agree with that. I think one place where we differ slightly is I think that race and racism played a much deeper role in this than anything else. The reaction to Obama, the sort of the Make America Great Again was all sort of evoking a past where white males dominated everything. And I think that was a large part of it, along with the discontent.
I agree with you now looking back on it. I don't think in 2016 there was a way to know that. Do you? I mean, well, repertorial.
I thought I knew it, but anyway.
You did? Okay. Well.
But that's not the point of our conversation.
No, but it's important to, you knew that just intuitively?
No, I went out in the country and spent 2 months reporting on the election, and that's where I came back saying that. This is not an essential question, and it's not, a reporter goes out and tries to get every interview they can, and however they come. But why do you think he talked to you, and why did he talk to you so much?
It started the 2018 book I did, Fear. I said openly in the book that not only did we have to worry about a crisis, but that the executive branch that Trump led for the first 2 years of his presidency experienced a nervous breakdown. Mm-hmm. And he didn't talk to me for that book. I tried through every means. You talk to friends, you talk to press secretaries, you talk to key cabinet people. And then when the book came out, he denounced it, said it was a pack of lies, and I was a Democratic operative. And what was so stunning about it, a couple of people who worked for him went to him and said, you know, by the way, it's all true. And oh, it's all true. And when he discovered I was doing a second book, he said, oh, okay, now I'll talk to him. And the process of talking to him, I could get him on the phone almost any time, day or night. I had a number to call. He called me 7 or 8 times unexpectedly, just out of the blue. And so I had to run around the house with the tape recorder that I could put him on a speakerphone and record. Because as you know, I mean, you're the best practitioner of this in journalism. You have to prepare your questions. You have to make the questions relevant to what you're doing, but they need to be relevant to the person you're interviewing. They need to be thinking or saying, hey, those are good questions. Those, I mean, my summary line is in this: you need to take somebody as seriously as they take themselves. And that means, yes, preparation, time, and the idea that somehow you needed to appeal to the President of the United States to prove to him you're taking him as seriously as he takes himself. As you know, in the media crush of the day, it's always what happened today, what's news. And I would go back and ask him questions that dealt into his frame of mind. And he said to me, and you know, some of this is BS, but he said, oh, those are good questions. I like those questions. And they are calibrated to get him to think about things he might not have been thinking about. You do this all the time, right?
Well, yes, but the notion of taking someone as seriously as they take themselves is a bit of a stretch with Donald Trump. I mean, he doesn't take anything seriously except his image, right? I mean,
well, no, I mean but it's not just his image he takes seriously. He takes himself seriously. He wants to be a winner, wants to win re-election.
That's his image, yes. I mean, I think
and so as much as I can dig into him, and there's no, I don't think it's manipulative at all. I think you want to say, hey, look, I take you seriously. And these are the questions I have. And he would let me push him and come back to issues that we had dropped, like race relations. I mean, he said that when I said, you know, do you understand the pain and anger that Black people feel in America? We're white privileged males, Trump and myself. And we have a special responsibility to understand that. I, as a reporter, he is president. And we played the tape of this. He's just mocking me, David. He's saying, oh, wow, you drank the Kool-Aid on that. You listened to yourself. What'd you think of that?
Right. Yes. You know, I want to broaden it a little bit here, and because we're dealing in an election where there are two important candidates. You wrote in your Obama books quite a bit about Joe Biden and how he dealt with Republicans during the budget discussions and other things. What were the larger impressions you came away with about Biden during that research?
I did 2 books on Obama when Biden was vice president. Of course, the first, Obama's Wars, about the war in Afghanistan. And really responsibility for dealing with that initially, Obama handed off to Biden. He was very active in working on it up to the end, and was very much of an advocate for not sending a whole lot of additional troops. He thought we were, it would be Vietnam. So he's very smart about it, I thought. And on the budget negotiations, it was totally turned over to him until the end by Obama. And I think, quite honestly, Obama, you know this so well, Obama has a real ego. And I think he's done Biden a disservice by not going out there. I mean, Obama supports Biden. There's no question about that. But he should have gone out there, should go out there now. And let me tell you what Joe did. And his involvement in these issues was absolutely incredible, particularly the budget negotiations, which Obama turned over to Biden. So Biden negotiated with the Republicans for a year and set the strategy, directed the meetings, dealt with John Boehner, who was the Republican Speaker of the House at the time. And you know this, but there's something in Obama where he's got such an ego that he kind of won't let go and really say, I mean, he says nice things about Biden generally, but he won't get out and say for an hour, let me tell you all the things Joe did for me as vice president, and the good advice he gave me, and the management of a very delicate process in foreign affairs, in the Afghan war, and the budget negotiations.
Well, maybe I tend to agree with that. I think maybe after hearing this, he might do that. But you're right. He has a reserve there, and it is in part due to his ego. In all of your interviews with Trump, he was constantly disparaging other people. Nancy Pelosi, Obama, many times. What sense did you get about what he thinks about Biden? And is he more afraid of Biden than the others?
Well, he was always talking about Biden not being steady, not being, dropping not just hints, but saying, he, at one point I'm talking to Trump, and Trump is saying, because I'm asking about the virus, said, well, it hits old people really badly. And and asked me how old I was, and I was 77, and Trump at that time, I think, was only 73. And he said, well, this impairment is hit Biden. And he always put it in the context of Biden's impaired, he's slowed down. And obviously in the debate, Trump was trying to emphasize that. I think they will continue to emphasize it for the remaining weeks of the campaign. And there's look, Biden has lost a step, don't you think?
So is Trump. I mean,
yeah.
Yes. There's always a transference with Donald Trump. What he says about other people can be applied to himself so many times.
Fair point. But the Biden I knew, because I interviewed him extensively for the 2 Obama books. Yeah. He's slowed down a little bit. He's hesitant on some things. I don't necessarily agree with you about Trump. Trump is never hesitant. He just goes right for the throat of an opponent or says something outrageous. Now, well,
that's an animalistic instinct. I don't think that he can parse an English sentence. In that sense, I think he's slowed down.
Yes, but that's the way he uses talking points. He has things down. I've done more for Black people in America than any president except Lincoln. Right. And I would say to him, well, how about Lyndon Johnson? How about, and it's just that's his talking point,
Yes.
and he's gonna stick to it.
You know, I'm sure you've thought about the irony or paradox of the role that tape recordings have played in your career. You know, 47 years ago, the secret Nixon tapes, and now these tapes that are not at all secret, you know, with Donald Trump talking to you about them. Using those tapes as a starting point, how do you compare them, these two men, their flaws and egos and brains and narcissism, all of it?
Yeah, it's you could write a 3-volume book on that question. First of all, Nixon was a criminal and a provable criminal. No one has pinned a crime on Trump. All the investigations and so forth, and a crime, as we know, requires premeditation, almost always, particularly political crimes. You have to plot. Trump doesn't plot. He doesn't premeditate. It's all the impulse. I was pretty confident when Mueller did his investigation, he wasn't going to find the smoking gun because Trump doesn't think and act that way. I think the same way in the impeachment inquiry, certainly what Trump did with Zelensky and Ukraine and so forth was improper. Did it rise to that level of impeachment? I think we got in our minds from Nixon and Clinton. Impeachment has to be something very clear and unambiguous. There was some ambiguity in what happened with Ukraine and Trump, but Trump had that grip on the Republican senators, which he still has to this day. It is one.
How do you explain that?
I explain that as shame on the Republican senators. I know some of them. And the last line of my book is, in summary, Trump is the wrong man for the job. I know senators, Republicans, who will say that in a private whisper, but they won't go public with it. When I got to the end of the book and it reached that conclusion, as you know, you type along and you've got information and ideas, and I wrote that sentence and realized that was the obvious conclusion from the evidence. He is the wrong man for the job. But more importantly, as I talked it out with my wife Elsa and my assistants Evelyn Duffy and Steve Riley, I realized that I had an obligation to say that because that was my conclusion. If I was silent, like the Republican senators, I would have failed in my job as not just a citizen, but a reporter. I had all this evidence. I reached that conclusion. You can take and look at the evidence and reach another conclusion. That's fine. Let people do it. But I'm going to share mine, and I'm not going to join the ranks of the silent. And I think in journalism, we often think, look, as you know, David, we know each other, as you say, for over 40 years. I mean, that's a long time. Spent a lot of time interacting formally, informally. And one of the things you learn, at least my point of view, is these aren't partisan judgments. People will say, oh, you've reached a partisan. That's not a partisan judgment because Trump is a Republican. It is a conclusion based on evidence. If he was a Democrat and that was the evidence, I would say precisely the same thing. And it's just not partisan. But I was not going to, I suspect maybe you were surprised that I would say that, or maybe you see the reasoning of not participating in some sort of silence that,
I wasn't surprised at all. But I want to say to everybody watching this that Bob just gave the perfect encapsulation of why he's so valuable. He doesn't base his opinions on anything other than what he's reported himself. And that reporting goes very deep, and that adds to the weight of what he concludes. We're going to take a break here, and when I come back, I'm going to talk in detail about chapter 26, try to take Bob through it piece by piece, and then talk about his wife Elsa and some other things. So stay tuned.
Cap Times Idea Fest 2020 is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, the Burrish Group at UBS, a financial services firm with global access and a local focus to pursue what matters most for its clients. Major sponsors are HealthX Ventures, backing entrepreneurs who are creating value with digital health solutions. Exact Sciences, pursuing earlier detections and life-changing answers in the fight against cancer. Quartz, health plans built with you in mind. And Madison Gas and Electric, your community energy company whose goal is net zero carbon electricity by 2050. Co-sponsors are Epic Systems and the Godfrey Kahn Law Firm. Other sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Home Savings Bank, Unity Point Health Meritor, Cargo Coffee, and the Forward Theater Company. Media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal and Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Please consider becoming a Cap Times member. Learn more at membership.captimes.com.
So Trump in the Oval Office, December 5th, 2019. I sort of became obsessed when I was reading that interview because it showed so much about him just in that one setting and about how you do your work. So I'd like to sort of take it scene by scene. First, you come in and he says he has something to show you. What does he want to show you?
Oh, yeah, these are the pictures of him and Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, when he met with him. And they're almost sacred tablets. And he says, no one's seen these before. Well, they've been on the internet for years, but he thinks they're unique.
And yeah, he calls them iconic pictures, right? And
yes.
And says he likes Kim and Kim likes him. That sort of establishes right there what we all know about how he seems to be attracted to autocrats in various ways, murderous ones. And then you say you want to talk policy because with presidents, that policy is what matters. And then what happens in his response?
Well, didn't I say policy is the spine of the presidency? And he agreed. And I forget precisely what happened next. I'm sorry.
Well, immediately he gets vague and doesn't talk about policy.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to talk about it. I mean, it's the impression I got from that. Then you mentioned Barack Obama. And how does he respond to that?
Oh, well, he hates Obama. And I can't separate the interviews, but I don't know whether at this point did he actually say that Obama isn't a good speaker.
He said he's not very smart.
Yeah, not very smart.
And then compared him to himself.
And he said, he's so smart because, and isn't this where he goes back, the uncle who was at MIT,
right,
and how there's some sort of genetic transfer of intelligence from his uncle to him.
And then the deputy press secretary interrupts the meeting, says Trump has another appointment. And how does Trump respond to that?
Oh, he said, "We'll keep going,
Because why?
Oh, boy.
Because I find it very interesting and I love this guy.
Yeah.
Talking about you.
Yeah.
What did that mean?
Well, that meant, the seduction was on, and that's okay. There's a picture I put in the book of Trump's there at the desk, and Pence is there standing, and the chief of staff, Mulvaney, is standing, press secretary standing, and Kellyanne Conway, and I'm sitting there like, and Trump, not only is he selling those pictures of him and Kim Jong-un, he's got there a binder of his letters and the exchanges, 27 of them between Kim and himself.
Right.
And he's got the formal judicial appointments there, as if, the pictures, the exchanged letters, and then the sacred judicial appointments sitting there. I make the point at interviewing other presidents in the Oval Office, it's always down at the other end where you sit in the couch, president sits in the president's chair there, and there are no props, right?
Exactly.
You've interviewed, like Obama, did he have a prop when you interviewed?
No props. It is a little bit, his chair is higher than the reporters, so he's looking down a little bit, but they're not behind the Resolute desk ever, and it's much more informal than that.
Yeah, and it's maybe it's not informal, but it's there's
he's not trying to impress
spontaneity to it, and
right.
He's not making I've got pictures of me and so, and I've got here are all the things, the judicial appointments I make and so forth, and then at the end of the interview, that's when I asked him, "What's the job of the president?" And he said, "To protect the people."
Yes. As you're starting to realize, I'm conducting this part of the interview the way you conduct your interviews, piece by piece of what happened.
Right.
So then you ask him what the Trump-Pence strategy is.
Yeah, and
he doesn't have he doesn't know.
He doesn't even answer.
Right. And then you ask him for him to give you his taxes. And then you say, no, seriously. So at that point, I have a question for you, Bob, about that. From the time I first met you, one of the mantras that my friends and I always say when we're pretending we're Bob Woodward is, you've got to get the documents, right? So obviously asking someone for the documents is one way. Also just trying to get them some other way is what you've normally done throughout your career. Was this the only time you attempted to get these taxes, or by just asking him directly? How important did you think that was to understanding him?
Oh, I think it was important, and it's one of the things I failed on to get his taxes. I met with Sherry Dillon, who was his tax lawyer in Washington, and made a pitch in 2016 to get the tax returns, and saying naively, well, they're going to come out, and I will look at them and do them, in a come back with questions and try to do it in a very responsible, comprehensive way. And of course, I got no, the audit's going on, so we can't do that, which of course people realize, I hope, is total BS. He could do exactly, he could release that. But I think sometimes asking, like I asked for the letters from Kim Jong-un and the ones he sent, and I eventually got them.
Yes.
And so a frontal request, I think, is a useful approach, and obviously a more repertorial one, talking to aides and other people who may have access to documents to get them that way also.
Right. And of course, the New York Times got a lot of that information, which is important for us at the Washington Post to acknowledge that, that there's a big press corps out there, and whoever gets important information for the public, more power to them in the end, in sort of explaining what's really going on in this world.
Yeah, but the New York Times story was good, and they need to get credit for it, but they didn't have the tax returns.
No,
They had the information that somebody had provided for doing the tax returns. And I thought there was possibly what our old boss, Ben Bradley, used to call the extra squeeze. I thought the New York Times said some things, took an extra squeeze on conclusions from the information they have, which may be valid, may not be valid. For example, they make the point that he's $400 million in debt,
right.
to others, and it's unclear what the debt is, and that's true because that's not shown on tax returns. But for somebody in the real estate business, if he's worth $2 billion or $4 billion, it's possible. It's also possible if you really looked at it, if he's not worth much or maybe even anything. But if he's worth $2 billion or $4 billion, for somebody in the real estate business to have that level of debt is not that unusual. Sometimes people in the real estate business will have as much debt as they have assets. So I thought there was a kind of there's something mysterious. There is indeed something mysterious about it, and there's much to be explained. But I think when all that gets sorted out, it's not going to be clear that that was some nefarious lever that somebody or some groups of people or Russians had on Trump. It may turn out to be, but not necessarily.
Well, nefarious, we can't know. But what you can know is that he's that much in debt, and he's the president of the United States, and he owes it to somebody.
Yes, exactly.
Which in and of itself is problematic.
Oh, yes, and is significant in the context of his failure to disconnect himself from the Trump organization. And I mean, all of that is, but what always has surprised me about this, David, is no one ever really found anything criminal in this, Mueller or the impeachment investigation. At this point, and which goes back to what we were talking about, my theme of Trump doesn't premeditate, he doesn't think, he doesn't plan. And so maybe he did some things that were criminal, quite likely, but in a way, it doesn't surprise me that no one has nailed him like Nixon was nailed, saying, take the money and pay $40,000 for one of the Watergate burglars' silence. Clearly criminal, clearly obstruction of justice, where in Trump, we don't see that.
Well, that chapter hasn't been written yet, and most likely won't be until he's no longer president, I would argue. And then we'll see, what comes out. More likely in terms of his finances than his presidency, in a sense.
Yes, and the overall point of this is critical, and it reflects on his failure to understand what the presidency is. The presidency is a sacred trust. It's not just a constitutional office. It is a sacred trust. And if you're going to run for the presidency and take the office and take that very important oath, you have an obligation to disconnect yourself from your past, particularly your financial past, where the interests may not overlap with those of being president. And the failure to understand that is part of the moral and constitutional catastrophe of the Trump presidency. Now, you said something earlier, we said about my opinion. And I wonder, when I reached the conclusion that Trump is the wrong man for the job, is that an opinion, or is that a conclusion based on, as I say, from overwhelming evidence? What is an opinion?
That's a semantic question, and I meant, as I said before we went to the break, that your conclusions or opinions are based on evidence.
Yeah.
And so you could say that's a conclusion, but it's also, someone could debate it. So to that extent, it's an opinion.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And you know, what you were just talking about is interesting to me because I'm also sort of interested in your first session with him at Mar-a-Lago, where you start talking about impeachment, and he calls himself a student of history, right? I like learning from the past. I can't think of anybody who's learned less from the past, but what was that all about?
Well, that's one of his lines about himself, and unfortunately, this goes to another question about introspection and self-knowledge, and you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses, right? Mm-hmm. And any business, particularly the presidency, and for him to say that, of course, is absurd. But he's locked into this view of not who he is, but what maybe he should be. At least he's understanding enough to think, oh yeah, the president should be a student of history. So I'll say I'm a student of history. But that's as far as it goes, because there's no history. There's the statement, I'm a student of history, because maybe he thinks that's high church, high road stuff. And it is, but the failure to understand that, see, we're at this, what is it, October 9th, right? And what's going to happen the next 3 or 4 weeks or next 2 months in this country? We are in for a kind of constitutional battle, legal battle, moral battle, party battle, human against human. And Trump is locked in his mind that he's superior to Joe Biden. Now, one of the things you have to do when you're in a competitive world anyway, I mean, let me just, journalism is competitive, right? Mm-hmm. That I know and have seen this you are a much better writer than I am. You comprehend trends and you can talk to people and put big picture stuff with little picture stuff and connect it in a very, very significant way. I hope I'm not deluded to think that I have that capacity. I don't have that capacity. And it's something you have, and okay, I'm going to yield that territory to you, and I'm going to try to do what I think I can do as well as anyone, or
better than
at least as well. No. See, that, I mean, let's get this on the record.
No, I'm not going to accept that.
Pardon? No, it's, I've told this story, but it's important to repeat it here, I think. After Nixon resigned, 1974, Katharine Graham, the owner of the Post, the publisher, wrote Carl Bernstein and myself a letter on yellow legal a yellow legal pad, not all the stationery she had. Said, "Dear Carl and Bob, now that Nixon's resigned, you did some of the stories. Now don't start thinking too highly of yourselves. And let me give you some advice. And the advice is beware the demon pomposity. And the pomposity pervades every institution in politics, academia, journalism, science, you name it. And pomposity is that sense of I really know what I'm doing. And I think you have to kind of operate on a daily basis of, okay, I have a method, but I really don't know where all this is leading, where it's going to go. And the atmosphere of pomposity that pervades too much in the country, I think, is a giant problem. I think it's a problem in journalism, and that we need to come down and be self-critical, introspective, and I think there ought to be a banner across the newsroom of the Washington Post, if we ever can get back there after the pandemic, that just says, "Beware the demon pomposity." Katharine Graham, 1974.
I think that you've proved that for a half century, that you don't have that pomposity. You've kept working at it. And every conversation I've had with you has started without presumptions. It started with curiosity and you wanting to know and try to figure something out and not sure where you were going with it, but knowing what you wanted to try to find out or what the questions were. And that's why I've always said, you know, to anybody who might question you, I always say, let Bob Woodward be Bob Woodward because he does it so well. And you have a great understanding of what your talents are, and they're of enormous importance to this country. That's all I got to say about it because I don't want you to argue with me about it. But
okay, but I will argue with
strong.
you, you know, and that the savior is the method.
Yes,
and the method
that's not an argument.
is,
I agree with you.
Yeah, and you can't take a shortcut on the method. Oh, I learned, if you'll bear with me on this, in the first week I worked at the Washington Post full time after I'd failed tryout, worked for a weekly paper for a year, and I was hired essentially because I had some stories in the weekly paper that they wished they had, and so let's hire this guy. And I learned in a single day, you can talk, it's possible to interview 16 people.
Mm-hmm.
And many stories, as we know, are just 2 or 3 people, or sometimes you can get away with 4 or 5, you can get away with 8, but you literally can, if you decide, I'm going to talk to 16 people today about something that's going on or the same subject. And what we have to do is ratchet up the inquiry, that we need to, you just have to keep going back at it and back at it. And so when Trump opened the door to,
Sorry.
is that an alarm? It's time to wake up.
No. That was somebody calling me. I forgot to deal with the phone.
So anyway, let me return to your questions. I'm talking too much.
No, you're not. How could you? This is your thing. But you mentioned coming to the Post in, what was it, 1971? Tell me about the sights and sounds of the newspaper back in that archaic age.
Yeah, it was great. There was a real feeling. It was after the Pentagon Papers, and that was there were 2 components to that were important. It reaffirmed the right of the press to publish secret documents, and that there could be no prior restraint. But on the Pentagon Papers, the New York Times led the charge, and we were second. And Ben Bradley hated being second. So there was this idea of, we're liberated to look at anything, but he didn't say this, to my knowledge, but the whole atmosphere was, we're not going to be second, we're going to be first. And so we can go and look at anything, do anything. I remember the city editor, my first week at the Post, September 1971, took me out to lunch and said, now you have an unlimited expense account. Essentially, this was a long time ago. You can take people to dinner, lunch, and so forth. You can travel, do whatever, and you can talk to anyone. In fact, you can call the White House if you want. But just let the White House reporter on the national staff know that you're doing it. And so there was that sense of the world is ours. And I loved it. Like, I know you love journalism. I mean, it's the best job in the world. So I had a nice police beat from 6:30 at night to 2:30 in the morning. And I loved the police beat, getting to know the cops and what their experience was and how they did their job. And then I'd go sleep for 6 or 7 hours and come in and do a day story, because there were always follow-up stories. There was always much to do. And so the morning of the Watergate burglary, which was June of 72, it was a beautiful Saturday morning, and the weekend editors kind of said, well, we've got this strange burglary at the Democratic headquarters. Who would be dumb enough to come in? And they immediately thought of me. I'm not kidding. He'll do anything. So they called me and woke me up and sent me to the courthouse. And that's when I heard the lead burglar in his business suit say, finally, after prodding from the judge, that he'd worked for the CIA. And I blurted out, holy shit, and went back to the paper and said, this guy worked for the CIA. Then the next day, Sunday, 2 people came to work on the story, follow up, Carl Bernstein and myself. And we then started working together, and I learned so much from him about reporting. I'll never be able to thank him enough. He would say, well, we're going to go knock on the door tonight of the bookkeeper. And I'd say, we are? And he'd say, yep, that's what we're doing.
Interesting. So that was more Carl than you.
Oh, yes. Much, much more.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I did.
Well, the holy shit mantra has been part of the Post ethos ever since, and mostly for the better, or almost always for the better.
Yeah, but it puts us, we lean forward, and I, in particular, made mistakes and leaning forward, and that's what I talked to Trump about this, in fact. Because, he always says everything's fake news, and he was denouncing the book that Rucker and Carol Leonnig did. And I said, wait a minute. He said, they make things up. I said, no, they don't make things up. They're excellent reporters. They have good sources. And he just couldn't believe that. And I said, I'm telling you, they have good sources. Sometimes all of us get something wrong. And I said to him, I think you're making a big mistake with a blanket denunciation of the media as fake news, because now, of course, politically, it serves his purposes.
Oh, yeah. He has no rational thought about it. I mean, he denounced your book as fake news, right?
Yes, exactly.
After talking to you 18 times.
Well, yeah, initially, but again, this is the confusion in his mind. The second book, the one we're talking about, Rage, he said, oh, it's a political hit job. And then he claimed he read it in one night.
Right.
Oh, yeah, he said this publicly, and he said it's very boring. But then a Fox News anchor, to his credit, said, is it accurate? And Trump said, okay, it's fine. And then he went out publicly and said, I say some great things in that book. And somebody said, well, what was your reaction to that? And I said that I always said I would let him have his say. And did let him have his say in a very as comprehensive a way as possible. So he again realizes that the book is true.
Assuming that he really did read it, which I'm not willing to assume.
No, nor am I.
We might have read a one-page synopsis of it or whatever. But
they always joke about what's on Trump's bedside table, and it's the TV clicker.
Bob, you're married to an extremely talented journalist, Elsa Walsh. I might be wrong, but it seemed to me that she played as big or bigger role in this book as any that you've done. Tell us about.
Yes, she really did. She edited it 6 times. She was always prodding me. She'd read transcripts of interviews. Go check this out. Get another source on that. A continual. And quite honestly, and she knows this, it was sometimes unpleasant to have your wife kind of say, why are you sitting here having dinner? Get your ass out of the chair and get back to work.
Most wives say the opposite.
Pardon?
Most wives say the opposite.
Yeah, no, because she was totally committed to this, and she had access to all the information. She I introduced her to Trump on the phone, and a couple of times he called, like the first time, and he said, "Is Bob there?" And she said, "Who's calling?" Right. And he said, "Donald Trump." Which is the right response. Pardon?
I said, that's the right response. Who's calling?
Yeah, exactly. And so her level of engagement on that, and the other, I know we're out of time, understanding she and Jamie Gangel of CNN had is the importance of releasing the audio of these tapes. And I quite honestly had no plan to do so. And they said, you've got to release the audio. And so under their goading and pressure, I did, and they were so right. And part of it is the distrust. This is one of the things we need to confront in our business. We are distrusted. People don't trust the media. And you can say something in a book or a newspaper article, but when you have the audio of the President of the United States saying, oh yeah, I always played down the pandemic because I didn't want to, it's much different than what's in the book. So for me, it raises a really interesting question of what do we do to rebuild trust? Because I think we have that responsibility. And one of the things is to present the best obtainable evidence. And of course, when you can present the best obtainable evidence of the president talking for 9 hours and 41 minutes on all of the issues of the day, the virus, the race relations, the economy, the Supreme Court, you have a body of evidence that you've presented to the public that you normally don't have.
I think the best available evidence is could go on your tombstone someday, not anytime soon.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks so much.
You. Good seeing you. Thank you for inviting me, David.
Oh, it's terrific. Thank you.
Cap Times Idea Fest 2020 is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, the Burrish Group at UBS, a financial services firm with global access and a local focus to pursue what matters most for its clients. Major sponsors are HealthX Ventures, backing entrepreneurs who are creating value with digital health solutions. Exact Sciences, pursuing earlier detections and life-changing answers in the fight against cancer. Quartz, health plans built with you in mind. And Madison Gas and Electric, your community energy company whose goal is net zero carbon electricity by 2050. Co-sponsors are Epic Systems and the Godfrey Kahn Law Firm. Other sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Home Savings Bank, Unity Point Health Moderator, Cargo Coffee, and the Forward Theater Company. Media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal and Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Please consider becoming a Cap Times member. Learn more at membership.captimes.com.